What's going on, everybody? How you all doing today? Jay's here again, back with another coffee Q&A here on the Coffee channel. We are doing more or less daily live streams at 10 a.m. Eastern, so come and join us. We do coffee and coffee questions and talk. And this week I started to do questions about coffee from other places that I've been finding on the internet that I thought would be interesting to, to talk about. Yesterday we were talking about oh, I was just thinking about that. Anyway, we were talking about something yesterday, but today's question is about decaf. So I found this online, and let's have a look at it here. So this comes from a guy named David VanHook, and he's saying that is all decaf seasonal? I drink mostly decaf, and it seems that the majority of roasters, I use both Metabox and Trade, source their decafs from the same country at the same time. What I mean is, right now I've been trying to buy decafs from anywhere but Colombia. They come out dry and dusty for me, but almost everyone is selling only Colombians right now. 6 months ago, I could get Ethiopians from a number of producers, but those have all been replaced by Colombians. Is this a known thing? Great question. Yeah. Michael, what's going on, man? How are you, Michael? Good to see you. So is that a yes, absolutely. In a nutshell, it is a seasonal thing because, different countries are producing coffee at different times. Now, in the years before global warming really started to take effect on agriculture, Colombia used to have two main harvests. A major harvest in, is that right? It was a major harvest in November, December, I think it was, and then a minor harvest in June, right? And so you would have two cycles of harvest in Colombia. I guess that's because they're so much closer to the equator than, like Central America. So you'd be able to get two separate harvests. And what you're probably seeing now is that a lot of the coffees that are coming from Colombia are coming from the June early summer harvest. And well, actually now it's to the point where it's the producers that I know down in Colombia are telling me that it's kind of like almost constant harvest. Like some portion of their farm is coming to ripeness throughout the year. So it's not like concentrated into two separate times of the year. It's now more spread out. I'll have to ask them about that more, but that's the last time I talked to them, which is probably about a year ago. That's kind of the consensus. And so what you find in coffee supply is that there'll be production. Let's say there's a bigger, if let's say there's a bigger harvest in June, or the harvest comes in, one of the harvests comes in June. So that coffee will take several months to process and then ship to the United States. Pretty much if you're floating the coffee, once it leaves the port, in most ports of the world, it'll take about 30 days before it gets to somewhere in the United States, whether it's an East Coast port or a West Coast port, right? And so if it's coming from Colombia, of course, if it goes to West Coast port, it has to go through the canal, right? The Panama Canal. It can come up the east, it can come to the east side, which is not a big deal. If you're getting coffees from Ethiopia, which tend to come online towards the end of the year, those coffees will take at least 3 months to float here. Or the processing time will take about 3 to 4 months, maybe longer. And those also will come through the Suez Canal, right? Because they're all on containers. And you're going to find that a lot of these coffees will come throughout the year because most consumers, I mean, commercial consumers of coffee, meaning roasters or importers, they're buying, or the importers, let's say that, okay, go back. Your roaster is probably buying their coffee from an importer, right? Who is buying their coffees from wherever in the world. And they're buying those coffees, they're bringing them to the United States, they're putting them in a warehouse. That takes about 3 to 4 months lead time. So for example, if I went to, let's say, Central America this week or this month, which I was planning to do. I've kind of had to change that. But let's say I went there now and I decided I'm going to buy this X, Y, and Z coffees. I'm going to ship them to the United States. I would expect those to arrive at the very earliest, maybe April, typically closer to June, right? Because it's just going to take that much time, especially like Central America. We're putting the coffee in what we call en reposado, right? Which means that the coffee will rest for 30 days in parchment in a warehouse just to stabilize, right? And then from there, you're going to take that coffee. Let's say you're putting it in a reposado, which is a better process, more cost. You're then going to send that out to get decaffeinated, which may take a few weeks or 2 weeks or whatever, and then has to get back to the boat and then shipped to whatever country. Now, and so that's the basic way it works. Now, when it comes to decaffeination processes, you'll find like the one that you've been trying is almost certainly probably going to be what we call sugarcane decaf, right? And sugarcane decaf is just a newer way of calling a chemical process, right? Something that sounds nicer, and you'll read all this flowery stuff on the roasters' websites that talk about how much more natural it is because the ethyl acetate that comes that they use to make sugarcane process is a byproduct of sugarcane production. You can find it in different fruits and things like that, and that's all true. But it's still a chemical process. But those tend to be done all in Colombia because most countries, and I think Colombia is also like this, will not allow you to import green coffee into their producing country, right? So if you're producing coffee, you're really restricting green imports. Number one, to preserve your industry, because you want your public to buy your coffees. And secondly, because you don't want to introduce different types of pests and disease into your crops, right, that are from outside. So these are all important things that are part of the consideration. So you've got, when it comes to decaf, you've got sugarcane process that's really big in Colombia. You've got mountain water in Mexico. And then you've got other chemical processes that are happening in different parts of the world. Swiss water up in Canada and Vancouver. You've got other companies in Germany. So a lot of these, you'll ship all these coffees to these facilities, especially the ones that are outside of producing countries like Vancouver and Germany. They'll process the coffee decaffeination wise and then ship it out to you. So it's a different way of working. But so what's happening now is that you're probably seeing that a lot of the roasters that you're dealing with, especially if you're buying from Misto Box and Trade, those companies they're aggregating roasted coffees from different roasters that are pretty much following the same playbook, right? They're all doing very similar styles of coffee, probably all very nicely light roasted, very bright coffees. You're going to find you won't find very much variation between those roasters that are in those programs, from my understanding. I've not used them, so I can't really say with true authority on that, but pretty much within the specialty coffee trend, but within the specialty coffee world, that is the trend. Lighter, brighter, a lot of homogeneity in what's going on in the business. So not too much terribly interesting to me, at least. But so here's the thing. So you've got, let's talk more about this while we brew. We're going to brew up some coffee here because I thought, you know what, we're talking about decaf. I want to grab some coffee from the roastery, or at least where I'm storing all the coffee at the roastery. This is actually So David's going to be upset because he wants to find something that's not Colombian. This is Colombian. This is a Colombia from the Valle de Cauca, and really nice aromas actually. So this is a coffee that is a sugarcane process decaf, and the sugarcane process is, like I said, it's another type of, chemical process. And what I mean by that, well, let me just get a little bit of brewing going on, so it won't take too long today. All right, let's get back our scale. We're going to do our same brew recipe, always with the same. Just do 24 grams of coffee. Ooh. Too much. I need to adjust the scale. It's getting a little bit of abuse. Okay, that'll be good. But as you can see, this coffee is, nice. I think it's a nice, like light medium. I like lighter mediums. I like to get a little bit more roast development, a little more caramelization, more of that Maillard reaction to really get a nice kind of flavor, sweetness out of the coffee. Michael's asking, can you take any green coffee and go through the decaf process? Yes. yes, pretty much you can take any green coffee and process it. So one of the things I'll have to get more into that. So I'm going to take our grinder, the Barazza Virtuoso, one of my favorite grinders for home use. Turn that on. I adjusted the grind from yesterday. I made it a little bit slightly coarser because I did make some coffee in the afternoon, and the coffee was really a bit on the over extracted side because I think the grind is a little bit too fine. And that's something that I think that people should do. You know, everyone spends so much time like, oh, I got to dial this in, dial that in. You know, if you're a home user, make a cup. See how you like it. Did you like it? If you really got to, and make your adjustment. Remember what the problem was, and make your adjustment for the next time. So you don't have to, you know. I mean, unless you want to, unless you don't mind burning through coffee, that's up to you. But I'm saying, but what I do is that, like yesterday, I thought it was slightly too fine. So what I did today is I just coursing it up just a couple clicks, right, just to reduce that amount of development or that amount of extraction. All right, let's get our. We've got our bee house. We're gonna use the bee house again because I still haven't dug out the boxes that have all the other brewers in them. Louis number 4 filter. Back to it. Goes into our. Then a little bit of chaff going on here. Good morning, Mom. How are you doing today? Great to have you. All right, let's get our mug here. Excellent. I'm going to pump up the heat one more time. One more time. So yeah, a lot of roasters are buying from the same sources, right? It's very difficult for smaller roasters to source their own coffees. So they have to go to a lot of importers, and you'll find a lot of times the same coffee from different roasters because they're buying from the same source. And it's just part of the equation, you know, like you've got to have a pretty big operation or have some kind of something going on in order for the company to be able to source on their own. Like we source on our own, but like there's ways that we've worked around it to make it more feasible, but it's still wildly expensive. The biggest difference with that is that you can, when you're sourcing your own coffee, you can have these serendipitous moments where you'll find interesting coffees that you might not have found otherwise. Like if I had just gone and asked for, even if I had just gone and asked for samples from a producer that we work with, there's always something that the special that can happen when you're at the farm. But, you know, to go to the farm is expensive. Like it costs money, you know, like nowadays to fly down to Central America, just to Central America, at least what, $600, $800, $900, sometimes even $1,000. Then you've got to like arrange transportation, arrange hotels. You know, it is a cost. It is a large cost. And so a lot of small roasters just can't do it, just can't. And I totally understand that. All right, let's get this rolling. We got our timer. And we're going to start, we'll start brewing. I'm going to put about 80, 70, that's probably about 70 grams worth. Let it run 15 seconds. So you were asking, Michael, about can we take any green coffee? Yes, we can take any green coffee and make it into, okay, about 30 seconds now. We can make it into pretty much any, we could take any coffee and make it decaf. The thing is, in order to make decaf coffee cost effective, is that you really need to do about a full container's worth, which is about 40,000 pounds worth of coffee. So you're talking 100, depending on the coffee, you know, you're talking $120,000 of coffee. Most people cannot do that. And so what has happened over the years, especially in the history of coffee, is that the coffee they're sending for decaffeination, it tends not to be the best quality coffees produced. Because you know what, if you're buying, let's say you've got a really nice coffee that's costing you $6.50 a pound or something like that, and you're going to send that off for decaffeination, maybe the decaffeination costs you an extra, what, 25 to 50 cents a pound? Like now you've got a $7 coffee, $7.25. There's less people interested in buying that, and they're going to balk at that, especially because in the minds of like coffee roasters, decaf is inferior. Yeah, 40,000 pounds. Exactly, exactly. It's a lot. It's a lot. So it's really difficult. And so now you can run smaller lots, but the problem is that the cost is going to be almost the same. Like I can go to Swiss Water and say, "Hey, I got 1,000 pounds. Can you do this?" Well, it'll still be the same cost, more or less. Plus, do they want their operations are all scaled for volume, right? So they don't really want to run small batches. They want to run, because it's cost effective for them as well. So that's a major hurdle. Plus, then there's the whole thing about coffee roasters and their perception of decaf and the decaf drinker, right? Most people think decaf and they think it's uncaffeinated. So therefore, why do we care? That they're just wasting their effort, because really it's all about the caffeine. And that's part of the programming that we've had for coffee for generations, right? Coffee has always been a vehicle for caffeine, for pep, for something. It's been less about the enjoyment of coffee. Like really, the truth of the matter is American coffee is terrible, horrible. Like a lot of it's just utter rubbish, right? Like all of you guys know this. You guys have tried different coffees. You know that most coffee that most people drink is rubbish. Like I personally can't stomach most of it. I'm like, oh God, no. And I grew up, my dad was a big Taster's Choice drinker. So I hated coffee. Like I didn't get into coffee until 2002, until I got into the business, right? So, we have a history in this country of having bad coffee. And so you take bad coffee and you're already, I think most people subconsciously really kind of don't like it to a certain extent. And then you take that and the benefit is the caffeine, and you get rid of the caffeine. You're like, well, why would I even do that? But someone told me this a long time ago, and I really took it to heart as an operator, was that, when I started, of course, I also had that idea like, oh, what do we care about decaf? And one of my mentors was like, you need to think about decaf. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, most people drink coffee for the caffeine, right? I was like, yeah. Why do decaf drinkers drink coffee? Want to know? Because they like the flavor. Those are the true coffee lovers. They're drinking coffee because they truly enjoy it, not to get some kind of side benefit from it. And that's always stuck with me, right? It's like, it's something that I always think about. It's like, how do we find the best quality decaf? Because, and decaf, and it's so difficult because as an operator, when you look at your production, decaf makes up such a small percentage of it, right? Like unless you're a massive conglomerate, you won't look at a 40,000 pound container and think, oh, that's just a small amount of coffee for us. We can just totally, that's insignificant for us. For most operators, especially coffee operators, a container of coffee, even the bigger ones, a container of coffee is a significant amount of money, right? That's a lot. That's a good percentage of your yearly production, especially if you're a bigger one, right? So it's we have a kind of this misnomer. This is my mistake. Here, look at this flow. We are now, we're 5 minutes into this thing, and we are still not reaching. My critical error here was that I wasn't thinking about the structure of the bean, which was not going to be the same as yesterday's, and now we're paying the price. Now we got over 5 minutes now. We're still not completed the brew. We're going to have probably some level of over extraction. So this is probably, for David, it's probably where you're getting a lot of this mustiness, or what did you say? Not mustiness, but you're getting a lot of this dry and dustiness, because I should know better than this, but we cannot subject this coffee, the decaf coffee, to the same grind settings as our regular coffees. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. So let's go over the processes of making decaf. So you've got your green beans. I know I have some around here somewhere. Like you have green beans, right? These are green beans. We're going to take these green beans and we're going to decaffeinate them, right? So what happens in the decaffeination process? So let's say this coffee here uses the sugarcane process. And this is a process where you take your green beans and you steam them, right? And what the steaming does, it opens the pores of the beans to allow to allow you to start your process. So once you've opened the pores, then they will mix the coffee with ethyl acetate, right? The ethyl acetate is the chemical product that is supposed to be a byproduct of sugarcane processing or sugarcane production. And what that does is it will soak into the coffee and extract the caffeine out of it, right? Now, I believe that with the ethyl acetate and these chemical processes, like the Swiss water, mountain water is a little bit different in this respect, I believe. But basically, it works. So with ethyl acetate and methylene and methyl chloride, which is a German style of doing it, they soak it in those chemicals, and those chemicals essentially extract the caffeine out of the coffee. But I believe they leave the flavor in. Right? They don't take the flavor out. I think that's correct. I do have another video where I talk more about this in greater extent, with greater detail. I got a link in the description below. And then once that's done, they can strip the caffeine out of the ethyl acetate and then use it for their process. Then they steam the coffee again to close it up, I guess, and then dry it out and then ship it to you. Now, the way that Swiss water works and mountain water works, from my understanding, is that similar process. They'll steam it, they'll put it in a water bath when it's heated, and that water bath will strip out the caffeine and the flavor, much like brewing coffee will. But you're not grinding the coffee, you're just keeping it whole. And you're steaming it so that it opens the pores. Then that water is sent through a process where it strips the caffeine out of it without taking the flavor. And then that coffee, that heavy flavored water is mixed back with the coffee, dried so that the flavor dries back into the bean. Then it's dried out and then shipped. Now, what this all does, and which goes back to what I was saying about the grinding part of it, is that, and this also affects the way we roast it as well. It really, that steaming and drying of the bean, that stripping of the caffeine and the flavor and re-injecting of the flavor, all have an impact on the coffee itself. So when you look at a decaffeinated coffee bean, it looks messed up. Like it looks like maybe it was roasted a little bit or just beaten all to heck, right? That's because it really has. It's just damaged. The bean itself, the structural integrity of the bean had been damaged. So therefore, you have to roast it a little bit differently, a little bit more gentle, a little bit less. Plus, it's a little bit harder to tell when you're actually getting to the point of roast that you'd like, because especially since some of the coffees that we'll get their natural state is already brown and almost close to the color. Like if you were to put that onto like an Agtron and read it, it's probably pretty close to the 50-55 that we're looking for. And so it makes it a little more tricky to roast. And then when it comes to brewing, the grinding gets a little bit tricky. Like this, I use a pretty much similar setting to the Bel Sitio that we use, that I brewed yesterday for myself. And this was much more fine, much more restricted. So I don't know what we're going to get out of this, but it definitely is not the ideal. So let me just get rid of this. And then we're going to get our coffee, we're going to taste it. So there's a lot of things that are going on with decaf. Now, there's always going to be arguments with people. They say that Swiss water will tell you that their process is better. Mexico, Decafs will tell you that mountain water is better. A lot of people will tell you now that ethyl acetate is better. Personally speaking, I mean, I've always found that the flavors out of coffees that are processed using methyl chloride, the old school German chemical process, that people are like, oh, it's chemical, so it's dangerous. I found the flavors to be brighter there, but then the problem is that you can compare different coffees and different decafs, but you're not really comparing apples to apples. You're comparing like kumquats to pineapples, right? It's so costly to produce decaf coffee. You will not have a producer sending, coffee to, each of these 4 places to like have their process done to compare. You're not going to put out that much coffee to do that. And, it's hard to sell that much coffee. Michael's asking, what happens to the extracted caffeine? Do people add it back to different coffee to give an extra boost? So the extracted caffeine at these decaffeination process plants is converted back into powder and then sold as an industrial chemical, or for pharmaceuticals, or to Coca-Cola to power Coke and Diet Coke, which I use a lot. Yeah, okay, a little bit chalky. I can see that. A little bit sweet though, sweet and a little bit bright. Well, yeah. So they win. I mean, and there's always a need for caffeine. So that, and I think that the process is probably. I mean, these guys have facilities that probably cost them hundreds of millions of dollars to build. So I get it. But there's a demand for the caffeine. Also, another thing that's interesting about decaf, if you were able to get the same coffee, right? Let's say you got this Valle de Cauca, same coffee, same lot, and you sent one for decaf and you brought them back together and you cup them together, you will typically find that the decaf coffee is sweeter than the actual caffeinated version, because caffeine has a bitter, right? As a flavor, caffeine is bitter. So you're removing that bitterness from the coffee. So in some ways, you're actually improving the coffee. So if you can find a really pretty sweet coffee, decaffeinate it nicely, you theoretically should have a better product, right? And which is why a lot of roasters have gone with inferior quality or lower quality coffees, because by decaffeinating them, it makes it slightly sweeter. It improves the cup quality of the coffee. Really, it's really an interesting, dichotomy there that happens. Yeah, they win on both sides. They win on both sides. But yeah, that's kind of the deal with decaf. Let's see, what else did David have to say? Yes, so he says 6 months ago I could get Ethiopians for a number of producers. That's going to happen. So, like, I was just looking before this. I was looking online at some of my who I would buy, decaf from, and we buy decaf from importers mainly because we just don't go through enough of it, right? There was a time when I was working with one of my own producers they were doing decaffeination of their coffee, which was a fabulous time. I haven't seen if they've done that recently, but that's a really good time. But anyway, the right now, even the suppliers that I was looking at, they only have decaf mostly from Colombia. There's several different types of Colombians, and then there was one from Mexico. So, but these are green sources, so that's not great. But if you are looking for green coffee decaf, and you want to buy, and you're a consumer at home, and you go to roast your own, I think a great place to go is Sweet Maria's. I was looking at sweetmarias.com, and Owen's he's got I think he had 6 different decafs, and they were a wide arrangement, like not just Colombians, not just Centrals, not just Souths. They had African coffees as well. So there is availability out there. It's just that your roasters are probably not buying it because, roasters also have this thing about they want to, especially if it's decaf, they're probably trying to buy it as low price as possible because, again, we don't have enough respect for decaf. We just don't. As an industry, we just really don't have this respect for them. And it's understandable. I think decaf is really only prevalent in the United States, maybe to a certain extent, smaller extent, Canada. But everywhere else in the world, I never see decaf in the world. When I travel, I was like, who has decaf? I don't know. I haven't been to other Western nations like Australia. Well, I guess that's not a Western nation, but maybe there's decaf there. But at least decaf's real popular in the United States. All right. So that's pretty much it. We've got our Colombia Valle de Cauca decaf. Ethyl acetate. I still do think that methyl chloride produces a nicer quality cup. I think people want to fight me on that, but I don't know. I've tried different coffees, and it could just be the coffees that I've had from that were done methyl chloride. And ethyl acetate's fine. Swiss water's fine. Mountain water, Descamex is fine. I don't know. I would like to find a really nice decaf. This is actually pretty enough. All right. Anything else? All right, that's good. That's good for now. I hope that helps answers your questions about decaf and gives a little more insight about decaf. I think I go a little bit more specific into the process of the ethyl acetate in the other video. That is Coffee Q&A number 68. So link down in the description below. If you're interested in buying coffee, I do have this one available. Also linked down below. I've got to work right today on got to go run some test batches today at my friend's roastery on a small. We're going to use the Alilo, whatever, the bullet roaster. I'm going to run some test batches on this year's production of, what's it called? I'm still kind of in this haze. Like I haven't been getting good sleep lately. Of our yearly St. Patrick's coffee, the Phoenix one. It's got a Phoenix on it. What we do is we use Teeling whiskey from Ireland, and we kind of infuse the whiskey into the coffee. I'll do a tasting with that after, maybe later in the week or next week or so, as we get closer to St. Patrick's Day. But we use a process where we infuse it. There's actually a video on the Spro Coffee channel about how we do it that shows it, and it's kind of dramatic. All right, Mom, good to see you. Enjoy your day. You too. Have a great one. See you tomorrow. All right, so that's it pretty much for today. Thanks for tuning in. Back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. with another question from the world of coffee. So I hope you have a great one, and see you next time.